The real estate agent convinced my 78-year-old mom to sell her house for half its value, telling her, "You're lucky anyone wants this old place." He thought he'd found the perfect victim in a confused elderly woman. What he didn't know was that Mom had been 3 steps ahead from the beginning, and his perfect crime was about to become his worst nightmare. My name is James Fletcher, and at 45 years old, I thought I understood how to protect my family from anyone trying to take advantage of people I loved. As a software engineer living in Seattle, I'd always prided myself on being analytical and skeptical. But I underestimated both the persistence of certain salespeople and the sharp intelligence of my 78-year-old mother. Mom had been living alone in Tampa since Dad passed away 3 years earlier. Margaret Fletcher was a retired librarian who'd spent 40 years helping people navigate complex information systems. Despite her age, she remained sharp, independent, and fiercely protective of the home she'd shared with Dad for 35 years. The house was worth about $600,000, a beautiful 3-bedroom ranch in a desirable neighborhood with no mortgage and immaculate maintenance. Mom had always been clear that she wanted to stay in her home as long as possible, and I supported that decision completely. That's why I was surprised when she first mentioned Derek Sterling during one of our weekly video chats. "There's a real estate agent who's been calling," Mom told me. "Very nice man, very concerned about my welfare. He says the neighborhood is changing and I should consider my options." Something about the way she said it made me pay attention. Mom had always been polite but direct about unwanted solicitations. "What kind of options?" I asked. "Oh, he has some ideas about downsizing, moving somewhere more suitable for someone my age, says he specializes in helping seniors make smart financial decisions." At the time, it sounded like typical real estate agent persistence. I figured Mom could handle a pushy salesman, and I trusted her judgment about whether his advice had any merit. Over the next month, Derek's visits became more frequent and his message more urgent. Mom would mention him occasionally, always with the same slightly bemused tone that made me think she found his persistence more amusing than convincing. "Derek stopped by again today," she'd say. "He's very concerned about my safety, living alone in such a big house. He showed me some statistics about crime rates in the area." "Mom, you know you don't have to meet with him if you don't want to, right?" "Oh, he's not bothering me," she'd reply with a little smile I couldn't quite interpret. "He's actually quite informative. I'm learning a lot about real estate from Derek." I thought Mom was just being polite to a persistent salesman. Derek's approach became more sophisticated over time. He started bringing detailed reports, neighborhood analysis, and what he called market insights that painted an increasingly dire picture of Mom's situation. "He brought me a market analysis today," Mom said during one of our calls. "According to Derek, houses in my neighborhood have lost 15% of their value in the past 6 months. Mom, that doesn't sound right. The Tampa market has been stable from everything I've read." "That's what I thought too," Mom replied. "But Derek has all these official-looking documents and charts. He says I might not understand how quickly real estate markets can shift." Something about Derek's approach was starting to bother me. The urgency, the focus on Mom's age and supposed vulnerability, the dire predictions about market crashes, it all felt calculated rather than genuinely helpful. "Maybe I should look into this Derek guy," I suggested. "That's not necessary, dear," Mom replied calmly. "I'm handling Derek Sterling just fine." There was something in her tone, a quiet confidence that made me think she was in complete control of the situation. But I decided to do some research anyway. What I found made my blood run cold. Derek Sterling specialized in what the real estate industry called senior transition services. But online reviews and Better Business Bureau complaints painted a disturbing picture. Multiple families reported that Derek used high-pressure tactics, false market information, and emotional manipulation to convince elderly homeowners to sell their properties for far below market value. One review was particularly alarming. Derek Sterling convinced my 82-year-old father to sell our family home for $200,000 when it was worth $450,000. By the time we realized what had happened, Dad had already moved into assisted living that ate up his settlement money within 2 years. I called Mom immediately. Mom, I need to tell you something about Derek Sterling. I've been researching him online, and there are some concerning reviews from other families. I think you should be very careful about any advice he gives you. Mom listened quietly, then responded in a way that surprised me. That's very interesting, James. Thank you for doing that research. It confirms some things I've been thinking about Derek. So you'll stop meeting with him? Oh no, dear. I think Derek and I have more to discuss, but don't worry. I know exactly what Derek Sterling is trying to do. I should have pressed harder for details, but Mom's tone was so confident that I trusted she could handle whatever situation was developing. The breakthrough moment came 2 weeks later when Derek made what he clearly thought was his closing argument. He arrived at Mom's house with a purchase contract and an urgent story about a cash buyer who needed to close quickly. Mrs. Fletcher, I have to be honest with you, Derek said, using his most sincere voice. This isn't a great offer, but given the market conditions and the age of your property, it might be the best opportunity you'll have. The buyer is offering $300,000 for a quick close. Sometimes we have to be realistic about what older properties are worth in today's market. $300,000 for a house worth twice that amount. I know this seems low, Derek continued, but waiting could be risky. Property values in this area are declining, and buyers are getting more selective about older homes that need updating. You're lucky anyone wants this old place. Mom looked at the contract carefully, asking questions about closing costs, timeline, and contingencies. Derek answered each question with increasing confidence, clearly believing he was closing a deal with a confused elderly woman. Mom signed the contract that afternoon. When she called to tell me, I felt sick to my stomach. Mom, you can't be serious. $300,000? That house is worth twice that much. I know exactly what the house is worth, James. But I also know what Derek Sterling is worth, and I'm about to prove it. What do you mean? Derek thinks he's found the perfect victim in a confused old woman who doesn't understand contracts or property values. What Derek doesn't know is that I've been documenting everything he's said and done for the past 2 months, and I've included something in that contract that's going to make his life very complicated. For the first time since this whole situation began, I heard the steel in Mom's voice that I remembered from my childhood, the tone she'd used when dealing with difficult situations that required both intelligence and determination. Mom, what exactly have you been doing? What I've always done, dear. Research. Over the next hour, Mom explained the strategy she'd been developing since Derek's first phone call. My 78-year-old retired librarian mother had been running a sophisticated intelligence operation that would have impressed a private investigator. She'd been recording every conversation with Derek using a small digital recorder she kept in her pocket. Florida is a single-party consent state, which meant recording Derek without his knowledge was completely legal as long as she was participating in the conversation. Those recordings captured Derek's systematic lies about market conditions, his emotional manipulation tactics, and most damning of all, his explicit statements about why he targeted elderly homeowners. Derek told me that older clients are more trusting and less likely to second-guess professional advice, Mom explained. He also said that seniors often don't have family members who understand real estate to interfere with transactions. But the recordings were just the beginning. Mom had also been researching Derek's previous transactions through public records. And she'd discovered a pattern that confirmed my worst fears about his intentions. She'd even contacted several of Derek's previous clients and gathered detailed accounts of his methods. Most importantly, she'd consulted with an elder law attorney who helped her understand exactly how predatory real estate transactions worked and what legal protections were available to victims. That's when I learned about undue influence provisions in contract law. Mom explained. If someone uses deceptive practices, emotional manipulation, or false information to pressure an elderly person into a transaction, that contract can be voided and the perpetrator can face both civil and criminal penalties. The contract Mom had signed included a carefully worded clause that she'd insisted Derek add. This sale is contingent upon seller's mental capacity and the absence of undue influence. Should evidence emerge that buyer or buyer's agent used deceptive practices, false market information, or emotional manipulation to induce this contract shall be void and seller shall be entitled to damages. Derek had barely glanced at the clause, assuming it was standard legal language that protected him rather than a trap that would expose his entire operation. The legal process moved quickly once Mom's attorney filed complaints with the Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation and forwarded evidence to the FBI's Elder Fraud Division. Derek Sterling's real estate license was suspended within a week, pending investigation into multiple complaints. The FBI opened a federal case based on the pattern of fraudulent transactions affecting elderly victims across multiple states. But Derek's biggest mistake was trying to intimidate Mom when he realized the contract was falling apart. He showed up at her house angry and desperate, demanding that she honor the agreement and threatening legal action if she didn't complete the sale. "Mrs. Fletcher, you signed a legal contract. You can't just change your mind because your son is filling your head with nonsense about property values." "Actually, Derek, I can change my mind when the contract was based on fraud and elder abuse." "That's ridiculous. I never defrauded anyone. I've been trying to help you make a smart financial decision." "Really? Because I have recordings of you telling me that my house was worthless, that the neighborhood was becoming dangerous, and that I was lucky to find any buyer willing to take it. I also have documentation proving that every piece of market information you provided was false." Derek's face went white as he realized the extent of his legal exposure. "You can't record private conversations without permission. That's illegal." "Actually, in Florida, I can record any conversation I'm participating in, and I've been participating in a lot of very interesting conversations with you over the past 2 months. Mom played several excerpts from her recordings, including Derek's admission that he specifically targeted elderly homeowners because they were less likely to do independent research or ask difficult questions about market analysis. Derek tried to claim the recordings were taken out of context or that Mom had misunderstood his intentions. But the evidence was overwhelming and indisputable. The federal investigation revealed that Derek had systematically defrauded elderly homeowners across Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, stealing an estimated $3.2 million through below-market purchases that he immediately flipped for substantial profits. Derek Sterling was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for elder fraud and conspiracy. He was also ordered to pay $2.1 million in restitution to his victims, though most of that money was never recovered. Mom's case became a model for elder fraud prosecution and was featured in training materials for law enforcement agencies dealing with real estate scams targeting seniors. "I still don't understand how you saw through him so quickly," I told Mom after Derek's sentencing. "James, I spent 40 years as a librarian. My job was helping people find accurate information and avoid being misled by unreliable sources. Derek Sterling was just another unreliable source and frankly not a very sophisticated one." "But how did you know to start recording him from the beginning?" Mom smiled with the quiet satisfaction I'd seen when she'd successfully navigated particularly challenging research projects. "I didn't trust him from his first phone call. No legitimate real estate agent cold calls elderly homeowners with urgent warnings about market crashes and declining property values. So I started doing what I've always done when someone tries to feed me questionable information. I documented everything and verified nothing." Derek Sterling thought he'd found the perfect victim in a confused elderly woman who didn't understand property values or legal contracts. What he didn't know was that Mom had been 3 steps ahead from the beginning. and his perfect crime was about to become his worst nightmare. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do when someone underestimates you is let them keep thinking they're in control, right up until the moment you prove they never were.